from homeless to hero, discovered the incredible racing legend they mocked for food. The sound of laughter echoed through the streets of Millville, a tough industrial town where dreams go to die. Among the scornful snickers, you might hear whispers of Jake, the once proud race car driver, who now scavenged like a crow sifting through garbage. The battered old sedan he called home sat tucked away behind the community center, a stark reminder of the shattered life he now lived. Every discarded sandwich and overripe banana he foraged was a mockery of the glory days when crowds had roared his name from the stands. But then came Ben, an 11-year-old boy with a contagious spirit that ignited something deep within Jake. "You used to win races," Ben exclaimed, wide-eyed. "Teach me, please." It was a simple request, but it pulled Jake from the edge of despair. In those moments spent elbow-deep in grease, fixing an old go-kart together, Jake felt that flicker of purpose return. Ben saw potential where others saw failure. As they tinkered away, laughing and dreaming about racing, it felt like the world outside faded away, a universe where the whispers couldn't reach him. But the wind shifted again when news of the local racing event spread like wildfire. The 100,000 prize hung tantalizingly in the air, a siren's call promising redemption. Yet, with it, came the taunts. "What's a washed-up has been like you doing to chase a dream?" One man sneered, the word sharp enough to draw blood. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. Could he really step onto that track again? The prospect both thrilled and terrified him, a second chance cloaked in the risks of humiliation. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Jake stood in front of the mirror that morning, he barely recognized the man looking back. The scruffy beard, the hollow cheeks, and the fear plastered across his face screamed of defeat. Yet in his heart, the thought of his son pushed him forward. "I can't let him down," he whispered, remembering the little boy's laughter that had once filled their home. Racing was not just about speed, it was about family. It was about proving to Ben and to himself that he still had what it took. On the day of the race, the stands were packed with faces he had known, many now filled with disbelief. As he climbed into the driver's seat, Ben's hopeful eyes locked onto his, whispering, "Just remember, it's not just about winning, it's about proving to them you're still a hero." The engines roared to life, drowning out the doubts that clawed at him, and then it began the race of his life. Racing around that track wasn't just about speed, it was about confronting the ghosts that haunted him. Every turn and every lap brought him closer to facing his past, and perhaps a chance at his future. But just as he thought he might conquer it all, unexpected treachery lurked ahead, threatening to unravel everything he had worked for. Would this be the day he finally reclaimed his place, or would he fall once again, leaving his dreams buried beneath the weight of doubt and shame? The roar of engines blended with the pounding of Jake's heart. He gripped the wheel, knuckles white against the faded leather. It felt like a lifetime since he felt this rush, shivers of adrenaline, and the weight of the world pressing down all at once. This was more than just a race. It was a revival, a fight against the voices that had plagued him for so long. The starting signal flashed, and they were off. The scent of burning rubber filled the air as he pushed the pedal to the metal, feeling the power beneath him. Memories of past glories surged through his veins. He remembered the bright lights and the cheers, the sheer joy of crossing the finish line victoriously. But those memories were clouded by the shadows of what he had become. Each turn felt like a redemption arc, every curve a chance to show everyone and himself that he was still alive, still fighting. As the laps flew by, he found himself at the head of the pack. Hope sparked in his chest as he glanced over at Ben, who was jumping up and down, a ball of excitement. Just seeing that boy reminded Jake that this was not purely about racing. It was about hope, it was about family, and it was about belief. But suddenly, chaos erupted on the track. A car swerved hard and clipped another, sending a shockwave through the field. It was a split-second decision that had dire consequences. Jake swerved to avoid the wreck, heart racing. Metal crunched, tires screeched, and in an instant, everything changed. His heart dropped as he saw the car flip, the driver trapped inside. The caution lights flashed red and orange, illuminating the growing tension. "Stay steady, stay calm," he whispered to himself, his instincts kicking in. He had to think. He had spent years in this world, not just as a driver, but as a part of something bigger. And now, it was time to prove that survival was more important than any race. He could feel the weight of Ben's trusting gaze pulling him back down to earth. His body ached with the desire to win, but saving someone was paramount. Jake buzzed his radio, urging the crew and medics to the scene. He couldn't escape that feeling that the risk he took on the track needed to match the bravery in his heart. "I wouldn't let anyone else get hurt," he vowed, even as panic threatened to overwhelm him, but fear was no match for heart. He maneuvered through the chaos, his instincts guiding him as he raced toward the wreck. Each breath was a step closer to reclaiming his humanity. What he wanted most was to show Ben that true heroes didn't cross the finish line first. They were the ones who showed kindness in the face of adversity. Silence fell over the crowd as the track officials waved flags, and Jake's heart pounded loud enough to drown out the world. Would he really step up? Would they see him not just as the washed-up guy, but as a man who had finally found his worth again? Just then, a voice crackled through the radio, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Jake, are you sure? The race is still on." Jake knew he had to respond. But at that moment, as he approached the smoking wreckage, a question resonated in his mind. Was he ready to be more than a racer? And as fate would have it, the answer wasn't just about racing anymore. It would shape the future for him and Ben forever. Jake's heart raced not just from the speed of the situation, but from the weight of the choice he needed to make. Engines roared around him, but in that moment, they felt far away. He focused on the twisted metal ahead, its jagged edges glinting ominously under the caution lights. The wrecked car was nothing like the sleek machines he loved. This was chaos, danger, desperation. He could hear the distant crowd, their gasps echoing as they turned their eyes to the scene. He could almost feel their energy, a tense mixture of excitement and fear. "Jake, wait!" The voice crackled again. "You need to focus on the race." He hadn't come this far to let anyone down. But saving a life, that was different. That was what mattered now. In a race, you glory in the cheers. But in moments like this, the applause faded to nothing. This was about being human. With purpose, he pushed the accelerator to drive closer to the wreck. He spotted the dazed driver, trapped inside, struggling to move. Jake didn't waste a second. He slammed the door of his car open, barely thinking about the incoming rush of medics behind him. He needed to get to that young driver before it was too late. "Help is coming," he shouted, trying to keep his voice steady. But beneath his bravado, panic bubbled. "Can you hear me?" The young man nodded weakly, his face pale and smeared with blood. The sight twisted Jake's gut. Memories of his own past fights rushed through him. He had faced worse than this, hadn't he? How many times had he fought for survival on and off the track? "Just stay calm for me. I promise you're not alone." Jake reached for the car's door, but it was buckled tight. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he pulled harder. He could hear sirens in the distance, the medics getting closer. But he had to act fast. Jake took a deep breath, grounded himself, and with a fierce determination, He yanked the door one last time. The metal squealed in protest. Then, finally, it broke free. The medics were there now, rushing past him. Their equipment, bright and efficient, contrasted starkly with the wreckage. Jake stood aside, heart pounding, as they worked to pull the driver free. And in that moment, standing there, a sense of relief washed over him. This wasn't about racing anymore. This was bigger than wins and trophies. It was life and death, hope and resilience. Behind him, Jake could hear the murmurs from the crowd turning to applause. People were cheering not just for the race, but for humanity. His heart swelled as he felt Ben's small hand grip his. "Wow, Dad! You really did it." Ben's eyes sparkled with pride. For the first time in ages, Jake could feel those whispers that had haunted him begin to quiet. He had stepped up in a way he never thought possible. Yet, as the medical team pulled the driver from the wreck, another thought crept in. This moment might change everything for Jake, but could he handle the spotlight he had just stepped into? Could he be the hero Ben believed him to be? Just then, Jake noticed a familiar face in the crowd, a face he hadn't seen in years. And as their eyes met, the weight of his past crashed into him like a brick wall. What did this mean for him? Would it open old wounds or ignite a new beginning? Jake's breath caught as he recognized the man in the crowd, Ryan, his old racing rival. They had shared the track many years ago, once fierce competitors, and now mere shadows of that time. Ryan's expression was uncertain, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and something deeper, something Jake couldn't quite place. The applause around him faded, replaced by the chaotic buzz of his thoughts. Memories flooded back, racing under the bright lights, the thrill of victory, and the bitter taste of defeat. Ryan had fallen hard after those days, and Jake had never heard from him again. Seeing him now, battered and worn, stirred emotions Jake had buried for years. "Jake, are you okay?" Ben's small voice broke through Jake's inner turmoil. He turned to his son, whose face was bright with excitement, yet tinged with concern. "I'm fine, buddy. Just processing a few things." He looked back at Ryan, feeling an unexpected urge to reach out. What had happened to the man he once raced against, the one who had laughed and cheered just like he had? The medical team was still working, but every moment felt stretched thin, like time was whispering secrets to him. He considered all the choices he had made and how they had led him to this moment. Could he step outside of his current life, the one filled with racing glory and fatherly duties, and face the ghosts of his past? "Jake." Ryan's voice finally broke through the haze, calling out to him. "It's been a long time." "Yeah, it has." Jake's words hung between them, an awkward gap filled with memories and maybe regrets. "What happened to you?" Ryan shrugged as if the weight of the past didn't matter anymore. "Life, man. It gets complicated." He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the wreckage and back to Jake. "But I saw what you did back there. You didn't have to help. You could have stayed focused on the race." "Respect, man." A sense of pride swelled within him, but it mingled with guilt. "I couldn't just stand by. It wouldn't be right." This crowd, Ryan gestured to the people who were still cheering. "They're seeing you for something bigger than just speed on the track. You know that, right?" Jake nodded slowly, but uncertainty lingered in his chest. What if this changes everything? What if I can't keep up with the expectations? "You've already stepped into the role of a hero," Ryan said, his voice firm but gentle. "It's not about racing anymore for you, is it?" He felt the weight of those words as if they were tying the strands of his life together. Ryan, this man he hadn't seen in years, was pointing out the truth buried beneath the adrenaline and applause. Maybe he had been searching for more than trophies. Maybe he sought redemption for his past choices. As the paramedics finally lifted the injured driver onto a stretcher, Jake felt an unfamiliar tug in his chest. This moment could be a turning point for him, not just as a racer but as a father, a human being. The familiar thrill of competition had faded, replaced by a deeper sense of purpose. "Jake," Ben called again, tugging at his sleeve. "Can we go see them? Help them?" Jake looked down at his boyish, innocent face, full of hope. He was reminded of the legacy he wanted to leave behind. "Yeah," Jake replied, his voice steadier now. "Let us do that." But there was something else pulling at his thoughts, something unresolved with Ryan. A heavy question loomed. "What about you, Ryan? What are you going to do now?" Ryan hesitated and glanced back toward the crowd. "Guess I'll find my way, like you. Maybe it's time to reconnect with the things that matter." Jake could see determination rising in Ryan, another flicker of hope igniting in a place once filled with ash. As the crowd began to disperse, Jake knew this meeting was no coincidence. He had been pulled back into Ryan's orbit for a reason, and he felt an unshakable sense that the results of today's unforeseen events were just the beginning. This changed everything. But how different would he be when he stepped back into the spotlight? Would he have the courage to dive into his pain, and could he support someone else through their own struggle? The road ahead was not just about winning races anymore. It was about healing, facing the past, and finding the strength to embrace all that was still to come. What Jake didn't realize was that this was just the start of a journey he never expected to take, one that could lead to redemption not just for him, but for everyone involved. The sun sank lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing where the crowd had gathered just moments ago. Jake felt the weight of the day settle on his shoulders. He took a deep breath, feeling the tension in the air, the noise of the departing spectators fading into a distant hum. "Dad?" Ben's voice brought him back to the moment, his curious eyes wide and searching. "Are we really going to help?" Jake glanced at Ryan, whose gaze lingered on the unfolding scene. "Yeah, we will," he replied, kneeling to match Ben's level. "But not just helping them. I think we should find a way to help everyone who needs it." Ben nodded, his innocent enthusiasm radiating warmth. "Like superheroes?" "Exactly like superheroes," Jake said, a smile creeping onto his face, though a part of him felt that the title was a bit too grand. He straightened up, feeling renewed in his commitment to create meaning from the wreckage before him, both literal and metaphorical. Ryan began to walk beside him, his footsteps slow but steady. "You're a good man, Jake. Many wouldn't even think twice." Jake cast a sidelong glance at Ryan, noting the weariness painted on his features. It was sobering, really. They had chosen different paths, and the marks of those choices were written all over them. "What about you? You ever think you'd come back to racing? Maybe be involved in helping the next generation?" A shadow crossed Ryan's face. "I don't think I could fit into that world anymore. Not like I used to." He paused, gathering his thoughts, then added softly, "But I'd like to help in other ways. Maybe inspire someone." Jake felt a flicker of admiration as Ryan spoke. It reminded him that no matter the battles they faced, the heart behind it all was still alive and beating. "Why not start now? You don't have to race, but you can still coach or share your story." Ryan shrugged, uncertain. "People might not care what an old loser has to say." "Hey," Jake said, planting a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "You're not a loser. You fought battles, just different ones than I have. Life is about falling down and getting back up, no matter how many times it takes." Jake watched as a hint of hope ignited in Ryan's eyes. Maybe this could be a turning point not just for him, but for them both. They walked toward the medical team, where someone was frantically updating the drivers and families around, and Jake felt the electricity in the air, a charged connection of possibility. Suddenly, a commotion arose on the other side of the paramedic tent. A young man burst through, his eyes wild with panic. "My brother! He is still in there!" The crowd gasped, and Jake's heart raced with the urgency in the boy's voice. "Ben!" he called, reaching for his son's hand, the protective instinct surging through him. "Stay close." "Well, I can't just stand here," Ryan said, taking a step forward, the memories of competition igniting a fierce determination in him. "Let us help him." Jake nodded. Together. As they pushed through the throng of onlookers, the mixture of fear, anxiety, and adrenaline blurred all thoughts, filling him instead with an insistent calling. They reached the broken vehicle, the metallic shell a haunting reminder of yesterday's triumphs twisted into today's tragedies. Jake's throat tightened. Would this be a moment of loss, or a moment of redemption? Ryan squared his shoulders and looked at Jake, glancing back to the boy still shouting for his brother, desperate and unyielding. "You ready?" Jake nodded, his heart pounding not just from fear, but from a swelling sense of purpose. Together, they stepped into the chaos, ready to face whatever lay ahead. And in that moment, Jake understood more than ever. This was the race of his life, not for glory, but for humanity. But as they reached toward the wreck, a low creak echoed through the air, a sound that sent a chill down Jake's spine. What lay in the shadows could change everything again. Were they really prepared for what they might uncover? The creak hung in the air, a ghostly echo that sent tremors through Jake's core. It was a sound he'd heard before, that familiar grind of metal shifting under pressure. He glanced at Ryan, who was typically calm and collected, but now had a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Stay low," Ryan instructed, more to himself than anyone else, as he crouched down next to Jake. Ben clutched his father's hand, his small fingers trembling with the unknown tension, eyes darting between the wreckage and the faces of the gathering crowd. "Is he?" Jake could barely finish the question, the terrible reality looming large. Thoughts raced through his mind, images of what could be inside the mangled car. Before he could analyze the situation further, the young man's desperate plea broke through the haze around them. "He-s in there. Please!" His voice cracked, a mixture of hope and despair as he pointed at the wreckage. "All right," Ryan exclaimed, "let us see if we can get him out." With determination, he moved forward, reaching for a nearby emergency tool. Jake's heart raced as he followed, his instincts urging him to act, to be the hero Ben believed him to be. They began their work, pulling at the tangled metal, feeling the weight of the situation settle heavily on their shoulders. Jake's muscles strained against the effort, and sweat trickled down his brow, merging with the dirt caked around his eyes. As the two dug into the wreck, the crowd roared around them. Some held their breath, others murmured prayers. Jake could feel the weight of their collective fear, hope, and anticipation thrumming in the air. He caught Ryan's eye, both of them sharing an unspoken understanding this was about more than saving a life now. It was about showing Ben what it meant to care. "Help me lift this," Ryan shouted, motioning toward a twisted chunk that was particularly resistant. Jake shifted, his focus zeroing in on the task at hand. They pulled together with all their might, adrenaline fueling their actions. The metal groaned and creaked again, but this time it was breaking free under their combined strength. Suddenly, a loud crack pierced the air, and Jake's heart dropped as he realized the structure of the car was shifting dangerously. "Get back," he yelled, shoving Ben toward the crowd even as he braced for the worst. But in a split second, through the chaos, a voice cut through, sharp and clear. "No! I can't leave him." The young man's face twisted in agony, his brother still trapped within that metal tomb. Jake felt a rush of compassion wash over him. He stood tall, grounding himself. "We're close," he assured the young man. "We're going to get him out." Ryan grunted as he shifted another piece away, revealing a glimpse of the interior. "I can see him," he shouted, hope seeping into his voice. Jake's heart surged. "Can you reach him?" he asked, watching Ryan push aside the wreckage with sheer will. "I think so," Ryan answered back, his voice strained but determined. The crowd gasped as they caught sight of someone inside. Tension danced on the edges of Jake's mind. Was he alive? The seconds dragged out in agonizing slow motion. "Stay back," Ryan cautioned, wedging himself into the narrow space. He extended his hand once more, and in that moment, everything felt suspended in time. Would they truly be able to rescue this stranger? As Ryan reached in, and the crowd held its breath, Jake's mind flooded with the weight of possibility. They could change a fate here. Even just one small act could ripple through the very fabric of their community. But then, a deafening crash echoed behind them, alerting all present to a new threat lurking just beyond the chaos. Jake felt the world shift on its axis. What was lurking in those shadows? "Jake," Ben called, panic coloring his voice as he turned to face his father, eyes wide. Would they have the strength to face this new danger together? The stakes had just risen. How deep into the darkness were they willing to go? The sound of the crash penetrated the tension like a knife, slicing through the desperate hope that had built in the air moments before. Jake's heart raced, pounding in his ears. What was that? He muttered under his breath, adrenaline spiking. "Keep working," Ryan barked, his voice taut. He didn't look back to see what had happened. He focused solely on the task at hand, fighting for the life trapped within the wreck. Ryan knew they had no time to waste. The young man, still rooted beside them, now had tears streaming down his face. "Please, save my brother." His voice quivered, barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of desperation. Jake's eyes darted around. The crowd, once a source of encouragement, now felt more like a living, breathing entity filled with trepidation. What scared him even more was the ground beneath them, how it seemed unsettled, as if something unseen was rising. "Ben, stay close," he shouted, turning to make sure his son was out of harm's way. He hated the fear flickering through Ben's eyes, the uncertainty coloring his innocent face. He knelt, scooping him into a protective hug. "Hold tight. I won't let anything happen to you." As they embraced, Jake felt a moment of clarity. No matter what lay ahead, he had to be strong for Ben, for the trapped brother, and for all those who were looking on with bated breath. "Jake," Ryan called, breaking the silence that had descended. "I need you. We can't lose this chance." He was maneuvering into a tight space, arms extending like a lifeline towards that glimmer of hope hidden within the wreck. Jake scrambled back to his feet, pulling away from Ben. "Stay right here," he instructed, springing into action beside Ryan. Together, they pushed and pulled, sweat clinging to their brows, muscles trembling with exertion. With each heave, Jake felt the weight of all their fears and hopes pressing down on him. The noise of the crowd faded into a single mantra in his head: they were all in this together. They were all fighting for a life, for a brother, for love. Suddenly, another loud bang erupted behind them, and with it came the cries of alarm. Jake turned sharply, seeing the crowd begin to scatter. A heavy, dark shadow loomed at the edge of the wreck, a figure that didn't belong there. Panic surged through him. What was happening? "Get back," he yelled, sensing the urgency of the moment. He could feel the air shift around them. The young man's eyes widened in horror as he grasped the reality of danger creeping closer. In that instant, a collective gasp rose from the onlookers. People began to run, fear weaving through the crowd like wildfire. "No!" Jake shouted. "Don't leave. We have to stick together." It was naive, maybe, but in that moment, he was desperate to encourage solidarity against whatever threat was approaching. Ryan's voice broke through the chaos, strained but unwavering. "Jake, focus." His hands worked frantically inside the wreckage, and Jake snapped his attention back to the task. With renewed urgency, they pulled harder, desperate to free the trapped brother, despite the shouts around them and the panic rising. Each movement felt like a battle against time itself. Then, In the jumble of metal and debris, something caught Jake's eye, a glimmer of metal that wasn't part of the wreck. It was too bright, too deliberate. Jake's stomach dropped as he processed it. "What is that?" he whispered, terror creeping into his chest. He fought against his instinct to flee. The threat was all too real. Something much worse than the wreck, perhaps something that had already marked them all for danger. "Jake, we need to move," Ryan yelled, his tone firm, refusing to bend in the face of fear. Jake nodded, heart pounding, as they both fought against what was being revealed. They're in this together, whatever it was. They could not give up on the hope of saving a life or the belief that they could confront the darkness ahead. But as they cleared away the wreckage, a figure emerged, not the brother they sought, but something sinister that forced them to face an even harsher reality. What lay beneath the shadows was about to change everything they believed. Would they be able to confront this oncoming terror, or would it consume them whole? Jake's breath hitched as he squinted through the dim light cast by a flickering overhead lamp attached to the still smoldering wreckage. The figure that emerged was a silhouette at first, warped and trembling. As the dust settled, the dread in Jake's gut began to solidify into a horrifying realization. The figure stepped into view, its eyes wide and frantic. It was a man, dirt-smudged and ragged, hands shaking as he raised them in a plea. "Wait! No!" he shouted, voice echoing in the charged silence that fell over the scene. "I'm not what you think." Jake exchanged a glance with Ryan, both frozen by shock. "What do you mean?" Ryan called out, his voice taut with confusion and authority. The bystanders, their faces pale, gathered in a collective hush, hesitant to draw closer but unable to tear their eyes away from the unfolding drama. "Please!" "You don't understand." Panic laced the man's voice, cutting through Jake's heart like a cold knife. "I'm here to help." "Help?" Jake repeated, skepticism twisting like a coiled snake in his stomach. His mind raced. How could this man, so close to the wreck, possibly help? "Your friend," the man pointed shakily towards the wreckage, "he's in there, but there's more danger than you realize." The crash wasn't an accident. His voice tapered off, and in the fading light, his face was a mix of fear and regret. Jake's resolve wavered, uncertainty gnawing at him. Was he telling the truth? Even if he was, how could they trust someone who had been lurking in the shadows? "Ryan," Jake turned, voice low. "What do we do?" "Let him speak," Ryan replied, intensity burning in his eyes. "This could be our chance." The crowd stirred, whispers mingling with the frantic beats of heartbeats echoing in Jake's ears. Why would this stranger know anything? Yet the glimmer of hope in the back of his mind urged him to listen. "All right," he said cautiously. "Tell us everything." The man took a breath, steeling himself. "I was hiding here when the crash happened. I saw it all. Your friend isn't the only one trapped, and time is running out. You need to move faster before it gets worse." "What do you know that we don't?" Jake pressed, each word fighting against the rising tide of fear. "They're coming for you all. Those in charge, I've seen them move in the dark. They know what is at stake here. If you don't act now..." The ominous tone hung in the air. Jake felt a chill, something primal clawing at him, shifting his perspective on the situation. How was this man involved? What was really happening? Ryan stepped closer, narrowing his eyes. "Why should we believe you?" "Because," the man replied, desperation dripping from each word, "I was just like you, a bystander before my eyes were opened. But now I am something else." The gravity of his words sunk into Jake, twisting at his thoughts like a vice. A sense of unity flickered, an understanding that perhaps they were all caught in a struggle larger than any of them, bystanders to their own fate. Suddenly, another loud explosion shook the ground, sending tremors through the air as the gathering gasped, terror-stricken. The crowd surged, pushing backward. Jake's heart sank as he instinctively moved closer to Ben, who was frozen with wide eyes, confusion landing heavy on his small shoulders. "We have to do something," he shouted, voice cracking under the pressure of the moment. Jake gripped Ben's shoulder, grounding him. "We will," he promised, even as uncertainty hung thick around them. Yet, deep in his gut, he felt the urgency rise, like a storm. As night began to envelope them in darkness, Jake realized they were facing not only a fight for a life, but a battle for their very existence. Would they be able to escape whatever darkness was closing in? Or would they be swallowed whole, just another casualty in a terrifying scheme they barely understood? Something had to give, and soon. The chaos from the explosion reverberated through Jake's core, making every nerve in his body scream. He mentally shook himself, breaking through the paralysis of fear. Turning back to the man who had appeared from the shadows, Jake demanded, "What do we need to do?" The man's expression shifted, determination replacing fear. "We need to get your friend out first, but I can show you how to navigate safely." "They're watching, waiting to strike again." "Who is they?" Ryan pressed, voice tense with urgency. "What do you know?" "Listen to me," the man urged, his voice rising. "There are forces at play you can't begin to comprehend. It's not just about the crash. It's about what was on that plane, something that shouldn't have been there. If you don't act now, this will be just the beginning." Jake's chest tightened. His mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of what the man was saying. What was on the plane? His heartbeat raced, mixing dread with curiosity. Information that could expose them. "They'll do anything to cover it up," the man whispered, glancing around as if shadows could hear him. "I know you don't trust me, but I promise you, I can help." "Jake." Ben's voice pierced through the tense air. "What if we don't find him in time?" The child's eyes shone with tears, his small face reflecting the weight of their situation. Jake felt a surge of protectiveness surge inside him. "Stay close, buddy," he said softly, kneeling to meet Ben's gaze. "We're going to find him. I promise." He shot a look at Ryan, hoping his friend would understand. "We have to move. We can't waste time." Ryan nodded, clearly sensing that something was shifting. "All right, tell us how to get in there and find him," Ryan directed back to the man. "But if you're leading us into a trap, the wreckage is unstable," the man said urgently. "If we're going to do this, we have to go now. There's an entrance on the far side. I'll guide you." With no more time for hesitation, Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself. He turned to Ben, whose small hand gripped his tightly. "Stay close. I won't let anything happen to you." The crowd had begun to disperse, panic scattering them like leaves in a storm. Shadows flickered, and the darker the night became, the more Jake felt an unsettling tension building. Each step toward the wreckage weighed heavy, but the thought of his friend ignited an urgency that pushed him forward. As they stumbled over debris, the flames flickered less fiercely. The burning wreckage seemed to breathe a sigh, the heat rising around them, as Jake's heart pounded in sync with his frantic thoughts. Could he really trust this stranger? The man led them silently, shadows pooling and shifting as they navigated the twisted metal and charred remains. Every creak of the wreckage sent adrenaline coursing through Jake. He could only think of his friend trapped inside. "Right here," the man said, stopping suddenly against a wall of wreckage. "This is the spot where I saw them take someone. We have to go through this opening." Jake's eyes went wide. "Is it safe?" "Safe enough," the man answered, his eyes darting. "But we need to hurry. They'll be looking for you." As they crawled through the debris, Jake felt a sinking feeling deep in his gut. Whatever nightmare had begun with the crash was only unraveling further. He could only hope they weren't too late. Beyond the wreckage, Jake caught sight of movement. Shadows shifting quickly, and the dread from before squeezed his heart. "What was that?" he whispered, barely daring to breathe. "Keep moving," the man urged, his urgency now palpable. "We're not alone." And just like that, as they pressed deeper into the wreckage, Jake braced himself for whatever lay ahead. The truth was unraveling, and it felt like they were racing against time. What awaited them on the other side? The darkness thickened, wrapping around Jake like a fog. Tension surged through him. He couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. Ben clutched at his side, his small fingers trembling, but his eyes resolute. Jake turned to the man who had slipped from the shadows. "You have to tell us what you know. We can't afford any more secrets." The man's face revealed his fear, but it morphed into something deeper: determination. "There are groups out there, people who won't stop until they cover this up. If they find you, they'll come after all of us." His voice was steady, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around them. "Why us?" Ryan asked, his voice steady, the years of racing behind him now echoing with a newfound gravity. "What do we have that they want?" The man hesitated, glancing over his shoulder again, then leaned in closer. "Because what you seek isn't just a life, it's a truth." The plane was carrying something sensitive, something that could change everything. You have the chance to expose it. Jake felt a fire ignite in his heart. This was bigger than racing, bigger than redemption. It was a chance to bring light to darkness, to be the hero, not just for Ben, but for all those who had been silenced. "Then let us find that brother. We don't have much time." They pressed on towards the wreckage exit. Each movement felt heavy with urgency. As they crawled through twisted metal, Jake could feel the heat radiating from the remnants, like embers begging for rebirth. They finally emerged into a dark expanse, a hidden space behind the wreck that seemed untouched by the chaos around them. "Over there," the man whispered, pointing to a dim light flickering through a gap in the debris. The air buzzed with tension as they approached, but Jake found himself drawing strength from Ben's presence. He stayed close, wrapping an arm around his son's shoulder, Ryan's face contorted with concentration as he carefully peeled back what remained of the crushed metal. "Can we reach him?" he breathed. "Hold on a second," the man urged, and Jake shot him a glance, irritation flaring at the warning in his voice. "It's not safe to move too fast. If they notice us," but before he could complete his sentence, a resounding crack echoed through the air. A shadow passed overhead, and Jake's heart raced again as an ominous figure emerged from the darkness. The crowd of bystanders had grown thin, and Jake felt utterly exposed. "Jake!" Ben shrieked, instinctively backing away. "Stay with me," Jake barked, stepping in front of Ben. Fear clawed at their throats as the figure advanced, revealing themselves to be a member of the very group threatening to consume them. "I know who you are," Jake said, his trembling voice firming into courage. "What do you want?" The figure laughed, a chilling sound that reverberated in the stillness. "You're meddling in something far beyond your understanding. Leave now, or there will be consequences." "I'm not going anywhere until I save that boy." Jake's voice cut through the tension. He couldn't let the fears of his past time stop him from this moment. He glanced back at Ryan and the man, searching for solidarity. They nodded, determination filling the air. "Let us move!" Ryan shouted, and everything snapped into action. The crowd was shifting, fear rising like smoke. They hustled towards the flickering light, pushing aside debris with ferocity born from desperation. Suddenly, Jake felt hands on him from behind. He turned to find the shadowy figure lunging. With swift reflexes, he threw himself into the man, feeling the world spin as they tumbled over debris. "Get out of here!" he shouted to Ben, adrenaline surging through his veins. Time warped then, blurring seconds into what felt like hours as Jake fought, grappling in his old racing suit and the weight of everything he had ever been. And just as the man's grip loosened enough for Jake to push him away, he heard a voice thin and faint. "Help me!" Jake's heart stopped. "Ben, help me!" he yelled, scrambling toward that flickering light. "Dad!" Ben's voice rose in desperation as he worked alongside Ryan, pulling back the metal to reveal a young man trapped, face smeared with soot and fear. The instant their eyes met, a bond forged in the fire of shared struggle became a lifeline. "We're here!" Ryan shouted, pulling at the rubble harder. The crowd outside had begun to recede, still murmuring nervous energy, but Jake's focus narrowed solely on that voice on life. They forced the metal apart, hands strained and sore, until finally, with one last heave, the young man was free. Ryan collapsed next to him, panting, but relief rushed through everyone present. "Thank you," the young man gasped, his voice cracking. "I thought I was going to die in there." But no sooner had they celebrated this small victory than the shadow loomed above them once more, glaring down with fury. "You shouldn't have done this." Jake's heart thundered. The time for hesitation had passed. "Now you'll see who the real heroes are," he declared, his voice reverberating with newfound strength. In that moment, he understood. They were more than just racers, more than wanderers. Together, they had chosen to fight not just for survival, but for truth and hope. Ben's grip tightened around his father's arm, eyes sparkling with awe. "We can do this, Dad." "Yes," Jake said, feeling a wave of purpose wash over him. Together. And as they faced the darkness, they knew that it wasn't about what they had left behind. It was about forging ahead into the light, arms joined and hearts connected, ready to face whatever came next. In that charged moment, true heroes were born, standing not just for glory, but for those who had been silenced. They took a step forward, ready to reclaim their story. Now, the world would see they were more than just fighters. They were warriors of hope and community, rebuilding what had been lost and lighting the path ahead. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters. Comment your reactions and feelings about this ending. I want to hear your thoughts. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Don't wait not even one more second to spread the word. True fans, let us do this.